Good evening, I'm Erica Nelson, co-president along with Kristen Malone, our co-president for League of Women Voters of Glen Ellyn. Welcome tonight. Friday, February 14th, so this week, is the 100th birthday of the founding of the League of Women Voters. And so since we, thank you.
Valentine's Day.
That's right. Since we have a captive audience, we thought we would just share a couple of thoughts. Rooted in the women's suffrage movement, the League was founded as a nonpartisan grassroots organization just 6 months before the passage of the 19th Amendment that granted 20 million women the right to vote. Ever since, the League has been at the forefront of efforts to register, educate, and support voters and voting rights. Tonight's candidate forum is an important example of how this mission continues 100 years later. As we celebrate 100 years of women's suffrage in 2020, the League of Women Voters is fortunate to have thousands of dedicated members in hundreds of chapters across the nation, including almost 4,000 members here in Illinois who share a commitment to protect our democracy. The League of Women Voters Glen Ellyn is 167 members strong. We welcome you to join our League to educate our community, young and old, and to share the importance of exercising their right, your right, our right to participate in our democracy and vote.
So we want to welcome everyone here.
Oh, excuse me.
All right. To the forums, there's Republican candidates running for the Illinois 6th Congressional District and Democratic candidates running for the DuPage County Board District 4. Candidate forums such as these provide a nonpartisan venue to give the general public an opportunity to participate in the electoral process by asking questions of candidates about issues that are important to them. Candidates make a choice about participating in this opportunity for civic discourse, and we really thank them for coming tonight and taking time out, especially on this very snowy evening. Now I want to introduce our moderator, Cynthia Schlisky. She's with the LaGrange League. Thank you, Cynthia.
One final public service announcement. At the table on the way in, and we encourage you to stop on the way out, is a fax for voters that the League of Women Voters Glen Ellyn provides with information about all your elected officials and information about dates of elections, etc. And an early voting information sheet so that you can have access to that as well. So please feel free to pick those up. Before we start, I also want to introduce Tim Elliott, if you'd stand, Mr. Elliott, who is in our audience. Tim is running unopposed as a Republican for the District 4 DuPage County Board. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to welcome everyone. And you are going to hear from these candidates here tonight. So this is what we're all about. As she explained, the League is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse candidates for public office. Our purpose is to promote political responsibility through the informed and active participation of citizens in government. And that's why we're here at this forum tonight. So you can learn about these candidates and you can make an informed choice when you vote. We always have rules at our forums, and so I'm going to go through the rules. And the candidates have already seen these and have agreed to these, but I want you to understand them as well. They're also printed on the back side of your programs, but I'm going to emphasize a few points. Each of the candidates participating here, like I said, has signed and agreed to these rules. And I am responsible for enforcing them. So if anybody gets out of hand, it's up to me to keep them in line. The candidates drew lots to determine the order in which they'll give their opening statements. And after that, then we'll just alternate between them. Since there's only two, it's not that complicated. Each candidate has 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then there'll be questions that you can provide. You all should have little cards, and if you have questions that you would like to submit, we have our card collector back here. Wave your hand, and you'll put your hands up, and they'll come get your questions if you have questions that you would like to submit.
Why can't we just ask?
No, this is the way we do it. You write your questions out. It just makes it much more,
Civil.
Conversational.
yes, all right, civil, all right, that's what we'll say. And their closing statements will be 1 minute. And we have, like I said, these people will collect them. If you don't have a card, just wave your hand and they'll bring you one. We also have members back here who are reviewing the questions, and if we get too many of the same question, they'll put them together, and they also will sometimes clarify it. Sometimes I can't read them very well, so they help me with that. And we'll get to as many questions as we can before the time is up. We're going to have about a half hour to do this first forum. We've asked that all the campaign materials be kept outside, and they're on the table outside of the room, but we don't allow those inside the room. And this forum is being videotaped and will be available on YouTube. So if you have friends that are not here tonight and they would like to hear what the candidates have to say, you can refer them to that. The candidates have agreed that they won't use any voice, image, video, or other recordings unless they ask. And we ask that you not take pictures and you not record, because like I said, we're having it video recorded here. Also, please turn off your cell phones. We don't like any kinds of distractions. We're grateful to our candidates here who are willing to serve in office, but who have also agreed to come here tonight. And so let's show them our appreciation and respect. No clapping, cheering, booing, or vocalizing your agreement or disagreement. You can do that afterwards, but not during the forum. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. And first, like we said, we have our 2 Republican candidates here for the Illinois 6th Congressional District. And in a primary election, what you're doing is you are electing the candidates who will run in November from each party. And so you will be, when you go to the polls, you will be selecting either a Democrat, Republican. I don't know if you have green here in DuPage County or not, but that you will have one ballot. You don't get to vote, but you are selecting your candidates who will run in November. That's what a primary does. Okay, so let's get going here. And like we said, we selected, and Ms. Ives, you get to go first. So she has 2 minutes for her opening. Oh, I forgot to say, these are our timers right down here in front, and they'll wave at you when your time is up. Okay?
And this is on? Yes, it is. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you to the League for offering this symposium so people can really get to know me better, and I can also listen to your questions and respond in kinds, because I think it's really important that you know who you elect. There's nothing more important than making public policy on somebody else's and understanding how that impacts their lives. And I started out on Wheaton City Council back in 2011, and I then ran for state representative. And the entire time that I ran, I really understood why I was running. And for me personally, I got involved in politics over taxes. And in the state of Illinois, where you have the highest taxes on a tax burden on any individual in the entire nation, then there's a reason to be concerned about that. But I ran as a taxpayer advocate, and I went down to Springfield and I did exactly what I said I was going to do, which was defend taxpayers. And I think that's important to bring up to you, because when you listen to my responses tonight, I'm going to represent you exactly the way that I say I'm going to represent you, and I have a long history of doing that. Look, I am somebody who stood up against my own party when I didn't agree with the policy. I took on my own political leaders. I took on special interests, whether it was ComEd and Exelon, or wanting to bail out Chicago Public Schools on backs of suburban taxpayers. I took on nearly everybody that I could to defend the people in my constituents. And in fact, my best legislation came from the constituents that I served, from the College DuPage reform that I put in, to the network adequacy bill, and more. And so that's what's important to get across here. It's very important that you understand the decision in 2020. Do you want more government in your life, or do you want more freedom in your life? Do you want somebody who rules over you, or do you want somebody who will represent you? I'm Jeannie Ives. I stand on the side of freedom. I stand on the side of representing you, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kinzler.
First of all, I'd like to thank the League and congratulations on 100 years in
operation. That's a big thing. Thank you, Cynthia. A special thanks to Mrs. Doyle, who was our kindergarten teacher for our 2 kids. So they turned out okay, 5 years later. Thank you. So my name's Dr. Gordon J. Kinzler. I'm running for U.S. Representative for Illinois Congressional District 6. I'm a kidney transplant surgeon. I'm a colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. As a physician, I've learned compassion, empathy, and sensibility. I joined our military out of a deep sense of duty and resolve. I entered this race because I'm concerned that many in Congress are promoting a socialist agenda that is taking our nation down a dangerous path. I have a strong belief that the principles of our founding fathers will serve us best in our future. I'm a firm believer in free markets, less government intervention, fewer regulations, lower taxes, a balanced budget, strong military, and securing our borders. If elected, I'll continue to fight political corruption from the national level, make sure we provide quality and affordable health care with lower generic prescription prices, and protect our communities and keep our families safe. I'm a team builder, not a divider. I believe all citizens deserve to live their lives free of persecution, ridicule, or gender, based on their gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, or any other discriminatory grouping. When I do a kidney transplant, I found that the donor kidney from any race or religion works in any recipient regardless of their race or religion. Although we all have different skin tones, when I make just a 1 millimeter incision, everything looks the same. The veins are blue, the blood is red, and the fascia that holds us together is white. This type of attitude is what we need to see from our leaders in Washington. And when legislators come together and start working as a team, we're able to achieve much more than we ever imagined and improve the lives of every American. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll start with the questions. And I'm going to direct the first one to you first, and both candidates will answer all questions. So, Mr. Kinzler, how specifically, and this goes along with what you were just saying, will you work across the aisle in Congress to get things done?
Well, I always tell people, if we ran our hospital, where I work at Elmhurst Hospital, like they run Congress, all our patients would die. There definitely has to be some attitude of working together. Many of you know me from the Park District in Glen Ellyn. You know, I ran as basically the only Republican, and there were 6 other Democrat colleagues I had. In Glen Ellyn, the board president is elected by the board itself. And believe it or not, I thought I'd never be the president of the Park District in Glen Ellyn, but after a couple of years of working together with our colleagues, you know, they elected me president of the Park District. And during that time, in a 2-year period, we ended up on a $10 million operating budget, having a $1 million surplus. We basically, instead of spending it, gave it back to the taxpayers and lowered property taxes on the Park District portion of the tax bill by 33%. So I think it's important going in the future that we work together, and basically I think I can do that.
Excuse me, I know you're a doctor, but isn't a sergeant?
Excuse me, please,
This is
no,
very important.
no, there are no questions.
Women's
Ma'am, you're going to have to
and
leave
I get
if
in
you don't
trouble
sit
if I work
down.
on the breast, which is the healthiest thing.
Excuse me.
So how would you
Excuse me.
handle that if
You're here and the League of Women Voters
in
for
chiropractic
No,
shouldn't get paid on what massage therapy
I can meet you afterwards and I'll
Yeah,
answer.
please,
I would like to know the
afterwards,
answers to those
and if you stand up again, you're going to have to leave.
I wrote it down, but they never get to my question.
You can ask afterwards. He said he would talk to you afterwards.
And
So
I'm a
if you have a
urologist, so I
specific
kind of work
question.
from the waist down.
Okay. Ms. Ives, the question to you, how specifically will you work across the aisle in Congress to get things done?
Listen, when I went down to Springfield, I served in the super minority under Governor Quinn and then the minority under Governor Rauner. So in order to pass legislation, I had to get bipartisan support for my legislation. I was able to do that time and time again. I think the most prominent example that you guys are aware of is the College of DuPage scandal. And on that legislation, I took the recommendations of what was coming forward, and I actually had to stand on the House floor and defend my bill that basically limited the severance contracts and limited the contracts in general for highly compensated administrators. And I had to stand there and defend that against my Republican colleagues. And I had to go over across the aisle to the Democrats and say, you know we need this legislation, help me pass it. And they helped me pass it, and then they took it another level and made it the next year. They took it from being just applicable to community colleges, to then being applicable to all the universities, and then 3 years later, they made it even a more restrictive covenant. So the legislation I started required me to work bipartisanly, and I did that time and again in Springfield, and I'll do the same when I'm in Congress.
Thank you. Okay, now the next question is going to come to you first, Ms. Ives. It's very complicated with two. And this is coming from the League of Women Voters here. Should Congress change the deadline for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment in order to enact the constitutional amendment?
I'm not a constitutional scholar. I think if they want to litigate it in the courts, they should litigate it in the courts and make the decision that way. But I personally think that they should just simply go through the whole process again. And if they want to redo it, then they can. But it's been decades since that first was initiated. But if they want to litigate in the courts, I think that's the place to do it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Kinzler.
Well, you know, it's an important concept, and I think, again, in the light of transparency, I know that it's been going on for years, but I would be okay with extending the dates if the states that have ratified it wanted to still go on the record as ratifying it and give it more time for the number of states that needed to ratify it.
Okay.
Oh, no, I put that.
Mr. Kinzler, yeah.
Yeah.
If elected, what will you do to ensure the viability of the Affordable Care Act, which thousands of people in Illinois count on for their health care? And whoever wrote this said me being one of them. So.
Okay. Great question. That comes up a lot. It's very tough to go in a minute to go over this. You know, I've had 30 years in the healthcare business. Most of the politicians are lawyers. My brother's a lawyer. I have nothing against lawyers. But they're always promising this healthcare and that healthcare. They don't work in the system. They don't know what works and what doesn't. I do. I have a whole lot of ideas on how to make things better. The Affordable Care Act, unfortunately, actually reduced health care for many people, even though more people had a piece of paper that said they had health care. With high deductibles, there are so many people now that come to see me months or even a year after they would have come originally because they're worried about not covering their deductible, and we're seeing more disease processes later on, and it's actually hurting people's health care. So again, 1 minute doesn't do this justice. I have a lot of ideas on how to fix it. The Affordable Care Act was not a good plan, and it's not working well, and I've got some ideas on how to fix it. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Ives.
I mean, I agree, you can't say this in 1 minute, and the Affordable Care Act was not a good plan, and the reason we know it's not a good plan because the Affordable Care Act does not exist as the Affordable Care Act in 2010. They got rid of the individual mandate, they got rid of the Cadillac tax on highly compensated plans, they got rid of the medical device tax, they have opened up the entire system to 1332 waivers so that states can create their own way of doing the Medicaid expansion. They're redoing the Medicaid expansion again, so it's no longer the Affordable Care Act. That's a misnomer at this point. But the truth is we need realistic solutions to the high cost of health care, and that has to come through the free market. We need association plans where small businesses can group together and create their own network. We need plans that allow for HSAs to have deductibility of tax consequences up to $18,000 so you can pay your premium costs from that. We need varied plans so that people can make decisions across state lines about what's the best way to solve these problems. But the free market is the best solution for all of this. It is not Medicare for all, universal health care, or anything along that lines. Thank you.
Okay, here's another one that you can see if you can do in a minute.
Okay.
Do you support the President's 2021 budget cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the public arts?
I support parts of the President's budget. I agree that we need to get on a glide path to sustainability. The idea that we're going to continue to have massively unfunded budgets is wrong. We know where that leads in the state of Illinois. It leads to bankruptcy. That's the truth. But look, he's cutting SSI, so he's hampering down on disability people, and so that's an area where there has been quite a bit of fraud, and we need to look at that. He is on the Medicare and the Medicaid cuts. The cuts that he's making are surgical cuts for the able-bodied adults who need to either work or get into the voluntary system, so I agree with those. Social Security, his cuts on that again deal with disabilities, and overall he's making some surgical cuts. We need to cut everything we can when you have $1 trillion deficit. That's unsustainable. You're indebting the future children of this nation, and they will have no way to pay this off. We need to prioritize our budget, and so why I don't think it's a perfect budget. I think it's the glide path to sustainability is there, but it's, I think there's room to maneuver here.
Thank you. Dr. Kinzler?
Yes, so as Jeannie points out, this budget that he proposed has $1 trillion deficit. And $1 trillion deficit isn't sustainable. I am a believer in a balanced budget. How are we going to get there? It's going to take a lot of hard work. Now, probably one of the biggest drivers of our deficit spending is healthcare. Again, I've seen so much from the inside where we waste money. One of our hugest costs, and the government's a big payer of it, is medication costs. Even generic prices have went way up. I've known how to fix this for a while, and I'd like to get in there to basically start handling this. Obviously, we have some extra military spending. I can't say my actual opinion because I'm still in the military, but there's places where we can cut, particularly fraud with Medicare and Social Security. There was just a police commander that was cashing his mother's Social Security checks for 25 years. It was in the Tribune a couple weeks ago, and the guy collected like $400,000 or $500,000. So these are things that we need to cut out and hopefully get our way to a balanced budget. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Kinzler, now to you. What's your position on background checks for gun purchases at gun shows?
Well, I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is what protects all the other amendments. It's also a very important part of our Constitution, not for hunters. I am no longer a hunter, but to basically protect our citizens from government tyranny. Having said that, domestic abusers should not be able to purchase a gun. Criminals should not be able to purchase a gun. People with mental disabilities should not be able to purchase a gun. So we need to have certain controls so that the guns don't get in the hands of people that can use them to harm our citizens. As far as, I've heard people say, well, what about this type of rifle, this type of weapon? We do already have controls. I mean, you can't have a machine gun, you can't have a bazooka, you can't have a hand grenade. There are many weapons of war that in a closed society area would be dangerous. And so these are things that need to be worked out with both sides of the aisle.
Okay. Ms. Ives?
Yes, so we already have numerous gun checks. When you go to buy a weapon, you have to fill out a very comprehensive form that asks you all sorts of information about your background. And interestingly enough, if you use marijuana, that's a reason to not get a gun. And that's the truth, because marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. So if you check that box, you're either going to lie one way or the other. You're not using. If you're using, then you're not supposed to get it. So we have numerous checks on people who have weapons. And I think the real question here is, like, how do you prevent gun violence? And that's a big discussion, and it's one that we should have in a very, very concerted way. But the problem here really is that you've got mental health issues. You've got nearly all of the mass murders that have occurred in the past. There have been warning signs that have been neglected after neglected after neglected. You've got immediate family members who knew that something was maybe about to explode and did nothing. And so if you see something, you got to say something if you're in that type of area. And so it's about protecting gun violence. But look, there's plenty of legal gun owners, and none of this happens with them. And so I think the emphasis has got to be on how do you protect people from gun violence, and that's a big discussion. And there's ways about it. We can do it together.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. If elected, what will you work on to address the effects of global warming while balancing job growth?
So, yeah, you look, the climate is always changing. There's no doubt. You look, it was warmer 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 4,000, 7,000, 20,000 years. At one point, 85% of the state of Illinois was covered in a glacier. And it all melted way before we had SUVs and the industrial revolutions. But the climate does always change. And in fact, every 100 years, you get 7 to 8 years of sea level rise. That's a known fact. It's how do you go about delivering a modern economy in the best way and keeping your environment clean and healthy, and still delivering all of the benefits that have occurred that have become part of who we are as a nation, because we've had the benefit of lots of good energy sources. And how do you also not deny that to developing countries who also need to be pulled out of poverty by the use of fossil fuels that are the best thing? I mean, that's the big question. How do you preserve jobs, preserve our way of life, and still protect the environment? And that's where we need to go.
Are you talking about local communities?
Excuse me. Okay, Dr. Kinzler, question to you.
So, you know, the globe is always changing, you know, actually Mars' ice cap is melting, Venus's ice cap is melting, so is Pluto's. So there's other things, other factors in it. Having said that, it's very important that we mentor and that we take care of and we be good stewards for our Earth. You know, I like to break the mold of the typical conservative Republican because I like clean air, clean land, clean water. Many people don't know, but before I got into this level of politics, I was on the Environment Commission here for 5 years in Glen Ellyn, and I wrote the asbestos handling rules. We did the tree ordinance, and we did all kinds of environmental things. I started the recycle event, the Prairie Path cleanup. As a park district president, we restored the wetlands. We helped mitigate flooding down at Lake Ellyn. So, you know, from a local level all the way up to a state level to a national level, it's very important that we take care of our environment. I don't like to see it always turn into a political issue, because when it gets into a political issue, then you don't get anything done. Then everybody's arguing and fighting. There's a lot of things that we can work together on to kind of make our globe better and keep it in good check for, you know, our future generations. Thanks.
Okay, next question, and I'm going to combine two here. What specifically would you do on immigration reform, and what do you support along immigration reform, and what's your position on Dreamers?
So I definitely believe that we need to secure our southern border with some type of a barrier. The average illegal immigrant family costs the U.S. taxpayers about $14,000 more per year than they pay in taxes. This is going to be kind of an economical problem, and this is going to be a social problem. I have firsthand work, you know, in our hospital last summer. I was talking to infectious disease guy. We had a case of malaria in our hospital from somebody who came into our country illegally, and we were taking care of him in our hospital. We have, tuberculosis used to almost be unheard of in the United States. Now we're treating it in all our hospitals. So there are definitely things that we have to do to get an improvement in our illegal immigration problems. What was the other second part of the question?
Position on Dreamers?
Yeah, the position on Dreamers. You know, people who have lived their whole life here, we have to find some way of citizenship for them. We can't send them back. Most of them have been educated through our system. They're good taxpayers. They're good law-abiding citizens. Obviously, the criminals, the felons go back. That's an easy one. But we're going to have to find a way to get the Dreamers amnesty, but then it also has to be coupled with stopping the inflow of new people, especially from third world countries. Thanks.
All right, I gave him a little extra time because it was two questions in one. Okay, Jeannie.
Look, I am pro-legal immigration. One of the most fun things I did last month is that I was invited to the house in Aurora, where my husband had hired a refugee from Iraq, and the reason he had asylum was because he saved an American soldier's life. So he and his wife and his two boys came over here after spending 10 years kind of in Oman. And you know, to watch them succeed and be a part of the fabric. I mean, he's Shia, she's Sunni. They have a fantastic family, and these kids are going on to the University of Illinois and other great places. Super smart kids. We need these people in our country. We want them in our country. They're great citizens, great providers. I am pro-legal immigration all the way. But we need, you know, you're not a country without your borders. We need to control the border, 100% behind that. I think that once we have the border controlled, that includes visa overstays, which is 40% of the problem. We have to handle that. It's not, you know, just controlling the border, building walls, not all of it. It really isn't. In fact, it's only a part of it. But after that, we need to look at, you know, who's here and who's become a good citizen or who's got the potential to get on a pathway towards becoming at least a legal resident. And so I'd look at that. I'm completely opposed at this time, though, with taking some of our most precious tax dollars and denying educational opportunities for our citizen kids and giving it to illegal citizen kids. I simply oppose that.
Okay. Next question to you, Ms. Ives. Homelessness programs are provided by 6 federal agencies such as HUD, FEMA, and the VA. Are these programs adequately funded, and should there be a consolidation of any of these programs under one agency?
I'm all for consolidation. I think we throw that word around a lot in the state of Illinois. I know in the Trump budget that he talks about consolidating some of these grant programs. I think that over 600 of them, as a matter of fact, because the truth is there's a lot of administrative overhead that goes onto it. I think the best way to handle this program is like what we have here at DuPage PADS. They do a terrific job dealing with the homeless in a very humane way. I mean, they're incredible partners, and they build partnerships with everybody to take care of the homeless. And so the best way the federal dollars can be leveraged is really getting it down to the final user with as little, with as much pass-through between other layers of government so that all the dollars are really successfully used and put to great use at the local level. And I think that's where we have to look at the best places in the nation where doing the best job for homelessness. But I think that there has to be consolidation to get rid of any of the overhead waste so we can use every dollar to solve this problem, which I think we are capable of doing.
Thank you. Dr. Kinzler?
So I think homelessness is a big problem, and I think it's synonymous with some of the mental health issues we have in our country. So that's one of the things that we have to focus on, and that's going to help in the long run with homelessness. As far as the VA system, you know, when I was training at Loyola, I had to rotate at the Hines VA, and there were some very good doctors there. But as we know from some of the things that happened in Arizona a couple of years back, our VA patients and our VA population is not getting the care they need. I take care of a lot of people who've been exposed to things like Agent Orange and other health factors that they were related to when they served our country and protected us. And these are things that we need to kind of work extra on to basically fulfill our duty to these people and to fulfill our obligation to them. You know, one of the programs that actually President Obama started and President Trump continues is a program where any veteran can go to a private hospital if the VA can't get them in a timely manner, or if the VA doesn't have an expert that can take care of them. And we actually take care of those VA patients at our hospital, in Elmhurst Hospital, and that program works very well. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. This comes from the audience. As the parent of a gay daughter, LGBT rights are very important to me. If you were our representative, would you protect the federal rights of LGBT people in the 6th District to not face discrimination by employers, businesses, and/or the government?
Absolutely. I think we all have family members that are in that community. And you know, one of the things, and I've worked with them in the military, I work with them in the hospital, and you know what? They're just the same as everybody else, and I trust them and I enjoy working with them, and they do a good job, and I would trust some of them with my life. We can't discriminate. You know, this thing where people want to do conversion therapy, where people say AIDS is a punishment by God for people being gay, where people are saying that they can't raise kids because of their, you know, sexual orientation. That's all just a lot of baloney and hogwash, and that's one of the things where I think conservative Republicans get a bad rap that I have to constantly go places and undo, because I know from my medical training as a urologist, there are people that are hermaphrodites. Halfway down the body, they're an XX, and the other half, they're an XY. I asked this one big board of the religious right, I go, what is that, a man or a woman? They couldn't answer. So, I mean, these are things that we need to kind of put aside, because those are the things that divide us rather than bring us together.
Yeah, but that's our freedom. We can decide for
Ms.
ourselves.
Ives, question to you.
Yes.
That's freedom, right? We decide for ourselves.
Do you want to leave? You're really
No,
being
I'm
like
just thinking.
No, you should be quiet.
Okay. They're
Just
answering
start
the
to remind us
question.
of Congress.
And listen, or you can leave and wait for Dr. Kinzler.
Last chance.
Okay, Ms. Ives, question to you.
Look, I think that everybody has the right to live the life the way they want to. They absolutely do, and thank God we live in America where that can happen. Thank God that everybody has a First Amendment right, second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th. You name it, everybody gets treated the same way. That's the beauty of the American system. We are a nation of laws, not a nation of men. And we are equally protected under the Constitution, equally protected. And that holds true no matter how you identify. It's absolutely true. And so it doesn't matter how you want to identify yourself out. In the state of Illinois, you're still getting punished by nearly the highest property taxes in the state. It doesn't matter what your employment situation is, you still have to live under the rules that are written by your politicians that hamper business in the state. It doesn't matter where you live or what you do, you still have to abide by the laws to be a good neighbor, to mow your grass, to whatever. You are treated under the law the same way in this nation. There is no doubt about it. So I look past all of that and I look to the individual and see how we can meet their needs on other things.
Okay, this will be the last question before your closing statements. So this one comes to you first, Ms. Ives. Name one current leader who most inspires you.
Glad you get to go first.
I know, you get to think about it for a little bit.
Right, you did.
One current leader that most inspires me. Wow, there's so many of them. There really are.
I dream of Jeannie.
Well, I,
You know, I just, I have to say that I'm pretty inspired by my son
She
Nick.
was a leader for women.
I will say that I am inspired by my son Nick.
Sexy and beautiful. And she was smart.
I'm sorry, Mom.
Okay, no problem. No, I would say that I'm very much inspired by the people that I see in our military, and that includes my son Nick. He's a Navy pilot, and I understand the level of training that he goes through, and the difficulty of some of that training, in the sims that he has to go, and then completing flights on an aircraft carrier, and all of that. And I just look to our youth, and I look at kind of the leadership of those folks still wanting to come out, go ahead, defend the country. I think that those guys are the people that I look to for leadership. I really do. I think that we've got an incredible youth that is very patriotic, and they care about America, and they want the same opportunities that we had. And I really look to them as the future leaders, and they have they are growing up in a different society than we all did. They truly are. They're bombarded by social media. They've got a lot of stuff that they're expected to do. I mean, just to get into college these days, it's ridiculous. You might as well start your own not-for-profit in high school. I mean, it just goes on and on. Our youth I think, are under stress, yet they always seem to rise to the occasion and get things done. So I think in general, I would look to them as really good leaders examples.
thanks. And Dr. Kinzler, to you.
I think why it took us such a long time to come up with somebody is because I don't think I'm impressed with any of them. I'm not a career politician. I've been in local politics. I work most of my day, take care of patients and things. And most of the people in politics I've met, I'm not very impressed with. Who I am impressed with, I'm not a war fighter. I go down to Fort Benning. I take care of the people when they come back. And what strikes me most when I'm down at Fort Benning is I'll see a mom emptying her car with the groceries and 3 or 4 kids and a dog running around. And I realize that mom and those kids don't see their husband or their dad sometimes for 9 months, 10 months at a time. It used to be in the olden days people would be deployed once or twice overseas. Some of these guys I take care of have been deployed 5, 6, 7 times to these hellholes. And what I realize is that their kids who are born over a 5-year period may miss so many birthday parties, Little League games, all the things that we're able to enjoy with our kids and grandkids. And to me, those are the heroes. Those are the people that inspire me, and that's why I'm doing it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much for answering our questions. And, well, you want to go first?
Oh, that's right.
Dr. Kinzler,
Thanks.
since she started, you get to go first
No problem.
to close.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in your forum. I appreciate your great questions. I asked Henry Hyde many years ago, who was a friend and a patient of mine, what's the most important thing for a representative to do? And he said the most important thing is to listen. And that's one thing that I do when I listen to my patients. It's the first thing that we do to try to figure out what's wrong, and it's the first thing we do to then try to develop a plan to come up with a solution. And when we formulate a plan and institute a solution, we get success and we make them better. And I'd like to bring that talent to help residents of Congressional District 6 to also make their lives better. I'm a unifier, not a divider. I look for common ground where we can work together to get things done for our constituents. I'm a citizen volunteer, not a career politician. And I have the best chance, I believe, in beating our Democrat opponent in November. Again, my name's Dr. Gordon J. Kinzler. I'm running for Congressional District 6, and I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out and listening to us tonight. I really do appreciate your attendance here on this snowy day. Look, we've got big decisions to make. In 2020, you're going to help decide the direction of the country for decades to come. And from my view, as somebody who has sat here and been in the legislature for a long time, you need courageous people to speak up on your behalf. And that's a rare thing to do. It's hard to go against the special interests down there. It's hard to tell the lobbyists, no, I'm not voting for your bill. It's hard to tell your leadership, I think that's absolutely a crazy idea and there's no way I'm going down that road. It's hard to actually tell your colleague, you know what, I'm not voting for your bill either, even if you either vote or support on something else. I've been through the fray. I know what it takes to be a legislator and to come together around good policy. My best work was when I listened to my constituents and took their ideas and understood how government was impacting their lives and took them up to Springfield, wrote the bills, and got them passed in a bipartisan way. That's what I'll do as a Congresswoman. We've got big decisions to decide for the future of our youth. I'm doing this because I see the direction of our country, and I want my kids to have the same opportunities that I had growing up, and I don't see them getting those with the big government solutions that are being proposed. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you to our candidates. Want to give them a hand?